Bien, je vais simplement donner lecture du texte.
I will just read the text I received by Father Dubarle,
Son titre, c'est
who could not participate because of health reasons. The title is The Edes Image in the Homilia by Gregorius Referendarius. This communication aims at submitting a document which is not so well known relating to the Edes image. It is an homily pronounced on the occasion of the arrival to Constantinople of the image which was considered not made from human hands. The authors seem to be trustworthy, and this relates us to the brings us back to the image and makes us identify it with the present shroud in Turin. The thorough study Christus Bild Ernest von Dochschutz remarked at this homilia
Bibliothèque Vaticane et
homily. Recently it was stressed that this was finished before 1905 for the Vatican Library. He didn't have time to implement this project because he had found the homily, had decrypted it, and he was inclined to see a testimony in favor of the identity of the Edes image in the present shroud of Turin. And I obtained from the Vatican Library a photograph of the manuscript and I decrypted it. I was convinced that the Archdiakon Gregorius, without knowing, without identifying in the Edes image shroud, provides us with a very concrete and specific detail, which is the presence of the chest with the blood and water, which shows the identity of the shroud in Turin. This is confirmation of the assumptions made by Jan Wilson. The Referendarius is the clergy trust with the religious questions which referred to a compromise or an agreement. And the Edessa books were translated into Greek, and he refers of an exchange of letters between Akbar and Jesus. The text is very close to the Eusebius one in his ecclesiastical history, particularly the answer sent by Jesus to the prince. It doesn't imply the promise of immunity of the city against attacks from enemies. There are some meaningless changes. The observation is made that the books do not mention the image. Thaddeus sent to Abgar.
puis il répond à la question
After abstention, tells the Savior's career and the patient who had been rescued. Apostle Thomas was charged with the task of transmitting Thaddeus to bring it to Abgar. The ill person was to be healed, and this corresponds to Eusebio. Eusebio doesn't mention the image, but in his opinion, when Thaddeus enters Abgar, he sees on the faces of the messenger a big vision. Gregory speaks of the light coming from these images. Eusebius, who probably avoided a quotation in the sources, the tradition of Edessa probably introduced a more concrete element in the oldest document. the new piece of data of the cloth marked by bloody or the sweat is extraneous to Eusebius and Greek tradition. It refers to the origin of the image not made by man, and he refers it to a gesture by the Savior during his ministry of preaching and predication.
Oui, d'accord. Ben, j'essaie de raccourcir un petit peu, mais ce n'est pas très...
I will try to shorten, but it's not easy if you are not the author of the text. Sometimes later, I skipped something. Sometimes later, for a feast, the image of the homily was composed, which was attributed to the Emperor Constantine VII. This text summarizes data, the stay of Thaddeus with Tobia, and data coming from Gregorius. But this is presented as an alternative explanation of the image, and the image of the same narration is referred to Edessa too. I will skip some of the parts which are not so important and interesting. I would just like to say that the narration by Gregorius, Father Dubarle mentions, is connected to all of these wonderful and miraculous events, and this gives a lot of strength to the testimony. For instance, the speaker,
alors que le récit de Thaddée donne des...
Since the narration by Thaddeus provides examples of miracles, while the archdiacon mentioned just one miracle. One had been questioned in Edessa. So Gregorius mentions this event. Then he makes comparisons with other writers. He doesn't want to appeal to the public with some particular things. We have to say, however, that Procopius, during the Persian War, told in details the Cosroes attack against Edessa. This was followed by negotiations, but Procopius doesn't mention the image or procession and the existence of this wonderful image, while he wrote about it many years later. He assesses the promise of unity of the city and assesses that this is something posterior which was added by historians later. However, Procopius doesn't deny that God wanted to preserve the city from the attack from Persians. This sobriety from Gregorius can be found in another case. For instance, the crossing of Euphrates. Here too we have a parallel narration which relates of the miracle and the special events which took place. Gregorius mentions the crossing of the Euphrates without any miracle or any special event. And here the speaker quotes, he unfortunately quoting passages, but we cannot translate quotations if we do not have them written down. So these episodes are dealt with by Gregorius in a much sober way than what is done by parallel narrations. So when he starts talking about the arrival to Constantinople of the image of Edessa, Gregorius is very happy and thanks God for giving his people unanimity as to one specific condition. This is the reality of this image, a tradition which challenges and doubts this image, so it's split between yes and no. We have the historia, that is the direct observation according to the initial meaning of the Greek word. So the expression has to be included as a natural history. It is historia, like which means a knowledge of the human past thanks to testimonies and evidence. The traditional narrations, Greek narrations, cannot give us any better certainty. The image was produced not drying a face wet with water, but just drying blood caused by agony. Father Dubarle tells here what he realized after developing the reasons an historian can have to attribute Gregorius with objectivity, which is just confined to facts. We have to turn to the passage where he gives an unexpected testimony about the Edessa cloth or shroud. He didn't acknowledge their shroud, but he saw beyond the face also the chest with water and blood. This passage causes certain difficulties because there is no detailed description of the cloth, but a kind of discourse which is a kind of religious and moral spurring. The Greek language allows to shorten nouns. So the author describes the detailed study of this text and states that it is not possible during a conference provide a translation of everything because it would be necessary to make a continuous reference to written texts. Therefore, he suggests and advises as follows. It would be disappointing to give you a literal translation during a conference. All of this will be published. This text can be understood by readers who have a certain level of knowledge. It is not a systematic description of the relic because Gregorius did not discover the shroud. This was kept, and Gregorius had noticed the traces of the chest and the blood and water, and this was added to the image of the face. So on the one hand we have the face, on the other hand we have the chest and water which were poured out of it. Two similar prints are made up of liquids coming out of Christ's bodies. The word equality implies that these are two observable realities. So Christ, with his example, teaches us that it is legitimate to make images, but also do that without using outside dyes. The image of God is imprinted in our soul, and in our soul it is made up of sweat
On peut remarquer ici la
and fluids. Here we can see the literal loyalty to theological tradition it is inspired by. The total control of will on passions, which is foreseen by Gregorius, is very clear in the example of Christ during his
a modifié la tradition narrative.
Passion. Referendarius changed the traditional the narration tradition, which speaks of the print of or mark of a face wet with water. Talking of sweat and blood, we could base on what we have directly seen on the cloth. So it was not the result of eager imagination. The conclusion is the following. The testimony by Gregorius Referendarius on the relic of Edessa deserves to be taken into account and allows us to conclude an identity between a famous image and the shroud kept in Turin. So it connects the legendary narrations linked to the Edessa image to the relics of Constantinopolis, which were mentioned in various narrations. This is a subject which supports the existence of the Shroud of Turin starting from the year 944 when it gets to Constantinople.